Hey, fellas, I want to let you know about something that's been helping a lot of men that you may not be aware of. It's our I'm Just a Guy Bible study on the YouVersion Bible app. You ever catch yourself thinking, I'm just a guy? What real difference can I make? I know I've been there. It's easy to look around and see other guys who seem more qualified, more respected, or more put together. But when I started digging into scripture, I realized something powerful. God isn't looking for perfect men, He's looking for obedient ones. Over 20,000 men have gone through this study and discovered how God uses ordinary guys to do extraordinary things. I'd love for you to check it out too. You can find it at thelionwithin.us/uversion or just search The Lion Within Us directly on the Bible app. Hope you enjoy it and keep unleashing the lion within.
Welcome to The Lion Within Us, a podcast serving Christian men who are hungry to be the leaders God intends you to be. I'm your host, Chris Granger. Let's jump in. All right, fellas, it's your meet episode time. Let's get right into it, okay? So the scripture of the week this week is in 1 Timothy, the 4th chapter, the 8th verse. It says, for physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. All right, guys, so if you want to take that verse and have a better understanding on how to simplify and apply it to your life, go back in your podcast feed. The last podcast, our spiritual kickoff episode for this week, we'll have, I took some time to unpack that, to share it with you, how you, again, you can take this one little verse right here and how we can actually apply it to our daily walk, because that's what it's all about. Again, if you enjoy the spiritual kickoff episodes each week, guys, we do them Monday through Friday in our Lion Within Us community. It's a free way we try to encourage you, just to help you in your discipleship journey. So head over to thelionwithin.us to get started today, okay? This guest is a fun one. We're all the way from the Netherlands. We brought in Mark Oxer, okay? So he is a chartered professional coach out there. He is really leaning into this whole idea of sports, strength, and discipleship. I mean, it's a really interesting conversation. He has master degrees in strength and conditioning training, as well as leadership and management. And he has a really good way of practically bringing the experience that he's learned into discipleship. And that's what we talk about today. I mean, we really talk about that. I mean, he's served in a variety of different ministry type positions. He's worked with church, with parachurches. He's done all this stuff for the last 25 years. He's pursuing a doctorate right now, and he's just an awesome guy. He has a couple of little kids at home. He's got one on the way, living his life. He's just really leaned in to do what God's called him to do. And he shares with us some really practical insights around discipleship. What does that look like? Where the church has, in many ways, missed the mark, but that's okay. Where can we, as individuals, as Christian men, pick up the pace and start doing that course correction? Okay, so I think you're going to enjoy this conversation with my friend Mark Oxer. Mark, welcome to The Lion Within Us. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited about this.
I'm super pumped to have you too, for sure. And we always like to start just a little light, Mark. Maybe share something fun about you that not many people know about.
Well, if people Google me, they're going to find this out. But if they're listening for the first time and like, who is this guy? One of the things that will come up is that national champion for Settlers of Catan, and have actually participated in the Catan World Championships in real life, the Catan Digital World Championships, and then won the Masters Championships as well for Settlers of Catan. And then we'll get into it later, but the book that I wrote is actually not the first book that I've written. The first book that I ever wrote and published was a guide on how to win Settlers of Catan.
Okay. So I've never played the Settlers of Catan. So give me a one-on-one brief rundown. How's the game work?
It's a resource management game.
Okay.
So it's based on dice rolls, and on each dice roll you collect different resources, and then you utilize those resources to build different parts of the game, and those different pieces are all worth points. The first person to get 10 points wins.
Okay, fair enough. It sounds like you're really good at it, though.
Last time I checked, I was the number 5 ranked Masters player in the world. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So, guys, if you get invited over, don't play with Mark. You will lose, you know. Well, man, love that. That's the most unique. Tell me something fun about you that we've ever had on Alliance. So thank you for
Yes.
that. Well, maybe
Awesome.
share with our listeners just a little bit about you too, your bio, just how you came to know the Lord. Obviously, you're leaning into your walk with God in a meaningful way. But what did it look like for you growing up? Did you always go to church, or what does your personal journey look like?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question, and I outlined some of those things in the writing, obviously. But I grew up in an Anglican church, so both my parents were immigrants. They moved from England to Canada, so I grew up with parents who were from England. So we went to an Anglican church, Church of England, but it was more for how you, that's what a good Christian did,
Okay.
right? So
Okay.
you went to church on a Sunday. And so I went through the process of confirmation, which is what in the Anglican church. I was baptized as a baby and then went through confirmation classes and then served in the church. But I never really felt that it was real. But I didn't know I will say. You don't know what you don't know, and that applies to everything in life. But I didn't know that it wasn't real until I spent the time at a summer camp. So I went to summer camp, and it was a Mennonite Christian summer camp. And it was at that summer camp where I was surrounded by people who had real active living relationships with the real living God. And I was like, whoa, this is different. This isn't religious. This is relationship. Right.
How old were you when you went to that camp?
So there's other experiences that I could tie back to that. So I went there in grades 3 and in grade 5 with my school. They did what's called outdoor education when I was in grade 3 and 5. And those opportunities are to like learn how to like cook a bread over a fire and like start a fire and like use a compass and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that you did that when I was in grade school. And then when I was I believe it was around grade 8, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, is when I went to camp actually as a summer camper for a week at overnight camp. When all the counselors are like 20-year-old counseling staff and that kind of stuff. So that was around junior high age is when I went there. And I remember being I think it was like my second night there, the counselor in the cabin, whose birthday was 2 days ago, actually, yesterday or 2 days ago. I still keep in touch with him. This is my counselor from like years and years ago.
Really?
He was sharing us the gospel, and he just said, you know what, like, if you go to church and do all these things, it's great. But that doesn't make you a Christian any more than being in an airplane hangar makes you an airplane. And I remember laying in my bed being like, what is he talking? I didn't like sit up or anything, but I remember in my mind this moment of like, whoa. And he's like, if you want to pray a prayer to ask Christ into your life, to make it like personal and meaningful and everything. So I prayed that prayer that night in the cabin with him. And then from there, my relationship, specifically with regards to going to summer camp, really grew. So I spent time going through a leadership training program. A lot of camps called like an LIT, a leadership in training program. So I went through that, and then went on staff and was on staff for probably at least 10 years as a summer camp staff working with kids. And that was really formative in my life with regards to several things. So I know that you have a master class that is about connecting men together. And I still have friends from 1994 when I was summer camp. Those are still some of my closest friends in the world right now. So I still text message with those guys. Like, I live here in the Netherlands. Those guys are back in Canada, and we still text message almost daily back and forth. And those are guys that I met when I was my first year as staff at summer camp in 1994. So
Really?
yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, I
So
mean, when you think back to, like you said before, the camp experience, though, you were in church, but you felt like something was just off. There's a disconnect. I mean, reflecting back, what do you think was the disconnect?
I think, and this is, I don't want to come across as putting down the Anglican Church, because that's not my perspective, because I do think with that said, there's a lot of things that I gleaned from growing up in the Anglican Church that I have very much appreciated. And it's one of the things I touch upon in the book, like memorizing the Apostles' Creed. Like that was every week, Apostles' Creed, Apostles' Creed, Apostles' Creed. I know some faiths use like the Nicene Creed, but just having that that repetition in sort of like a song form put into your mind helps formation of your theology, right? So I'm very thankful for some of those things, reciting the Lord's Prayer every week. So some of those things I think were really formative, and I'm glad that I had those opportunities in the Anglican Church. But it was very um they have the book, in the Anglican Church is the Green Book of Services, right? So on this day you do this service, on this day you do this service, on this day you do this service. And then the homilies that are given are very like 7 to 15 minute kind of durations, not like what we think maybe in more of an evangelical church, like a sermon that could last half an hour, 45 minutes or something, right? So it was very, very structured, and like I'm going to use the term religious in that it was kind of everything was um and then being able to experience the the dichotomy of that in working at camp and seeing this is very relational in that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't have to take my hat off to pray if I don't want to, right? I can pray when I'm riding a horse. I can pray when I'm in a kayak. I can pray out in the field. I can pray when we're in chapel. Like we pray before meals, and I was just like, man, like this is very different than what the structure, like the very defined structure that I was brought up with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, that freedom and that relationship factor of the relationship with Christ was kind of, it sounds like that's where the counselors were really driving you guys at that camp.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So, I mean, you've taken that on your discipleship journey to the point now where you wrote the book called "This Is the Way." I mean, what led you to wanting to put this pen to paper? Because as someone who's written a book myself, I know there's a lot of work that just even goes through that process. And what do you feel like the call was that God was putting on your heart to write this?
Yeah, so I've been in the Netherlands now 3 years. My wife and I choose to move here after having our first son. We were living in Canada. At the time, I was working on a military base as a civilian, doing fitness training for Canadian military personnel. My wife was working helicopter emergency medical services. So we both had pretty cool jobs that we were like, hey, we'd be fine doing these jobs for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Um, Nice 10 acres of land, like rural Canada. We're like, oh, this is great. But we were far away from family. And that was important for us to be close to family for the raising of our son. And so we were like, well, we're probably going to end up having to move to the Netherlands then, because my parents still live in Canada. My one sister lives about a half an hour away from my parents. My other sister lives in Atlanta, Georgia. And then my cousins and other relatives are spread out throughout Canada. And then a large portion of them still in England. So, whereas if my wife's family, they all live close to Rotterdam within like a half an hour of each other. And my
Okay.
wife's in the middle of like 32 cousins.
Wow.
So I was like, well, if we want to be close to family, then it looks like we're going to go to the Netherlands. So
There you go.
we came here, and very different experience than what we were expecting. So there's a lot of shared history between Canada and Netherlands from World War II kind of onwards. There's been trade relationships economically, but then the Canadians are respected for what they did during World War II to help out in this part of the world. And there's been shared connections between the countries since the Second World War. And there is a lot of Dutch people speak English well. So language was a little bit not as much of a problem as we thought it might be. But going to church was very different than what I had expected it was going to be. So the Netherlands traditionally being a Protestant nation, then they've obviously had major battles, like what they had the battles in the 1700s with Spain versus Catholic and Protestantism. And so there was some really significant history with the Protestant faith here in the Netherlands. But when I got here, it was very much Dutch Reformed Calvinistic perspective, which wasn't the faith that I was brought up with or participating with. And it was a little bit confrontational for me to be able to engage into that, in that there's minimal, what the Dutch term evangelical churches, we would probably think of them more as like, not, I don't want to say charismatic Pentecostal, but it's a different, I'm going to go more relationship, less religious again, is how I would
Okay.
describe them.
Okay.
But finding such a church that had English language as part of daily life within the church has been challenging. And then as part of that, being like, yeah, I have friends who I've been friends with since the mid 90s, but they're all the way back in Canada. And so I'm like, I want to be able to have deep relationship with people here, connect meaningfully with men here, and talk about the important things in life and how things are going. And really struggled with that. So I would do things like I bought season tickets to a local soccer team, and I would take guys from the gym with me to the game. And even there, just talking to them, being like, hey, like, what's it like? Tell me about life. How's things going? And there's very much a different culture here where it doesn't seem that people really get deep into relationships. And I've even questioned some guys from church about that. Like, hey, do people get deep into relationships here? Like, who do you talk to about things that are going like hard in your life? Or if you're struggling with something, who do you talk to? And people are like, yeah, well, we don't, like those kind of things. Even right now, the Netherlands is going through an election coming up at the end of October. People don't talk about politics here. Like, it's just
Really?
a certain, yeah. And I know that in North America, it's very common for people to say, oh, hey, what do you do for work? And I honestly, like, it's not a question that gets asked here because people don't identify by what they do for their job. It's just like, oh yeah, so we want to just, and so, I mean, I had a conversation with somebody I worked with the other day, and they had a group of friends over, and these are friends that they've had for years. And the purpose of it was just to get to know each other better. And they sat down and all each shared about their own jobs and what they do for work and those kind of things. And I thought that was great that they did that, but I also find it a little bit strange because if I was back home, I could tell you the job that all of my friends do because it's just something that we talk about as
That's
North
right.
Americans, right? So
Yeah.
the book kind of came from a genesis of, again, like what your master class, I think, talks about, is not being isolated, not being solo, and then wanting to connect meaningfully with men, with regards to our relationship with God and going deeper in that relationship with him. And so partly a mental exercise for myself, but then also wanting to connect to others who might be feeling the same thing or feeling like they're stuck in that same place, and being like, hey, you're not alone. Let's see if I can either help you or the people in your life that we can connect you with to form that small circle, that tight circle, and grow together in community. So that's kind of where that all came from.
Okay. Love it. Love it. Well, guys, we're going to take our first break, and we'll come back and we'll keep digging in with Mark.
If you're tired of going at it alone, we understand. Every man needs wise counsel, but finding it can be quite the challenge. That's why we build our leadership masterminds. This isn't just more content, guys. It's real discipleship with a consistent rhythm, small cohorts of no more than 7 guys, honest hot seat sessions, and biblical counsel that turns good intentions into action. You'll get accountability, clarity, and a circle of brothers who will challenge you and cheer you on. We open up new options regularly, so there's room to find the right fit. It's not always easy, but it is worth it. The first step is simple. Take the Leadership Mastermind assessment. No pressure, no hype, just thoughtful questions to help you see where you are, where God is leading you, and whether this is a good option for your next step. Hey, if it's a fit, we're going to follow up with details. And if it's not, we'll point you to resources to help you keep growing. Either way, you move forward. So if you're ready to take the assessment, head over to thelionwithin.us/mastermind So that's thelionwithin.us/mastermind to get moving today.
Mark, one thing I was just as reading through the book, and I was thinking through, now you've mentioned this culture difference in the Netherlands. I'm just curious, what does discipleship look like where you're at right now? I mean, I have this picture of in America of what we hope for it to be at times. It doesn't always is come out as nice as we like, but I'm super curious since things are seems like there's a different means of communication. What does it look like there for discipleship?
Uh, So I'm gonna paint with a broad brush stroke if
Okay,
that's okay.
fair enough.
So I'm in seminary right now. I'm doing a doctoral program in seminary. With the program focus that I'm in is transformational leadership, and I'm actually writing my major paper, my thesis document on discipleship. So,
Oh, okay. Well, that's a relevant question then, Chris.
so I'm super glad you asked me this question. And the reason that I'm going to paint with a broad brushstroke is that I don't think discipleship is necessarily um, something that is, I'm going to say, lost here. I think that's actually it's something lost globally.
100%.
As capital C church, I think the capital C church is not doing a good job of discipleship, and I'm not saying that to put anybody down. I'm just that's the experience that I've had. Now, I've been able to be a part of different churches in leadership roles, and I've been a part of Christian Missionary Alliance churches and Mennonite churches and Baptist churches and Pentecostal churches with moving around for different jobs. I've had an opportunity to experience a lot of those different things. And universally, I don't think we're doing discipleship very well as a church. And so I don't think that changes whether I'm in Canada or the United States or in the Netherlands. Um, so I've found it in some ways, I would say, to be similar in that uh, it's not done well here, but that's not to put it down here. I think that's just a global thing. Now, there is, I would say, extra complications to it in that while Dutch people do speak English well, it's not their native tongue. And so articulating themselves about really deep interpersonal thoughts, feelings, experiences in a second language is never going to come across the same way as in a native language, right?
Right.
So there's a little bit of a disconnect maybe in that respect from things. And because the history of the country is very Calvinistic, the Protestant faith is very Calvinistic here, it's not I would say it's not overly focused on discipleship from that perspective. It's like it's very theological focus, but that doesn't necessarily mean in training the next generation who's going to train the next generation who's going to train the next generation. And this is where I'm working on my thesis document, is that my background, in addition to being involved in ministry, is in professional sport. And so I'm looking at how we can use practices from coaching principles and coaching theories to apply to church from a discipleship perspective and say, hey, you know what? We see a lot of coaches, training coaches, or coach the coach or train the trainer models in sport who then can go out and so we have a coach that they get taught and they go into their communities and they teach, and then they also go into their smaller schools and they just go into their and it kind of disseminates down. And that's more, I think, what that discipleship model is meant to look like. And how is there, or if there's a way that we can take some of those sport coaching theories, principles, models, and possibly apply them in a meaningful way, excuse me, in a ministry leadership perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm super curious from this. So when you start digging into the layers of this onion, what are you seeing? Are there any practices, anything that comes up from that coaching element that you see there's a direct impact to discipleship?
How much time do you have? So there's a couple things. When we look at obviously as Christ as an example, and that's part of the reason why, again, the book that I wrote is using Christ as the example and how he worked with his disciples. I think there's a lot of things that we can unpack from how Christ interacted with the people around him and that close group that he had. There's also a lot of writing from Paul, and Paul does a lot of work in mentoring other people. So when we look at Timothy, for example, and how the relationship that Paul had with Timothy, there's very specific pieces, and whether Paul knew he was doing them intentionally or not, and how he mentored other individuals. And there's a lot of things, even with how Paul lived his own life in leading different groups, that I think we can take and apply into. So there's biblical pieces from that side that I think are really relevant, right? And even if we look at Paul, he used a lot of athletic language, right?
For sure.
When
Yeah.
so there's, I think there's a reason for that, because there's a connection in those pieces. And then we look at the sports side. There's a few things that I'm really interested in digging into and learning more about. For example, uh, within sport, I literally just came from the gym like an hour ago, and I was talking with this about some of my athletes, and we're talking about different kinds of constraints and different kinds of interference that we'll intentionally provide for athletes. So coaching today, and for I coach at a CrossFit gym, so it's a lot of like 3-2-1, go fast, go hard, music is playing loud. In the middle of the workout, the power stopped, the music goes out, and everybody kind of like, whoa, hey, this isn't normal, what's going on? And I was like, okay. As a coach, I go over, I see if I can get the music restarted and get going, finish the workout. And they were like, Coach, that was so weird when the music went off. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm glad that you brought that up. We can actually use this as a talking point about contextual interference. And so what happened was we removed the music, and now the environment feels strange for you, and you're having to deal with your own thoughts, and you're dealing with these own things, right? Well, I flipped it on them and I said, well, in different sports, like the sport of weightlifting and powerlifting, which I've competed in, there's no music. When you step on stage, you're wearing a one-piece spandex outfit, the whole room is silent, you've got 3 judges and the entire audience staring at you to see if you're doing this lift correctly, right? No music. That would just freak some people right out. But part of it is, well, if you never train with that silence, and then you get put into this environment where the silence is, now you're getting pushed to the boundaries of your limits. Your mind is going, what is going on? What is going on? And you're not able to focus on the task at hand. So we can something as simple as music, we can use to manipulate your environment, and obviously to change your bandwidth and expand your bandwidth, hopefully. Right. So I think what happens in the church, oftentimes when we think about discipleship, we don't think about a failure perspective. We always think of like, well, we're going to make sure that they can do this before they do that. We're going to make sure that they can then we're going to give them the next piece and give them the next piece. In sport, that doesn't happen. We actually challenge you with things that we know you can't do or probably can't do on purpose.
That's right.
Well, why aren't we doing those same things in ministry? Why are we not allowing people to be challenged in ways where they're like, oh man, like, yeah, you might, as a leader, you might not be able to accomplish this, but that's okay. Now we're going to be able to learn from that and grow from that.
Right.
And so there's some pieces to that. Like I said, with like contextual interference is one of the scientific concepts with that. Constraints-led learning is a really interesting perspective. One of my peers is doing his thesis on constraints-led learning. He's using a sport base. He's a very high-level jiu-jitsu athlete, and then bringing some of that from his jiu-jitsu practice into his ministry practice as well. So, but the idea being, again, I'll use my wife's job as an example, being a helicopter emergency medical nurse. The only time that she went to work, not like to work, but the only time she got called is when things got really bad. So she would go to the base, they'd be waiting, the tones would go off, 2 pilots, nurse and paramedic get in the helicopter and go. But that doesn't happen if it's a fender bender. That happens when it's a multi-car crash. That happens when the police and the ambulance get there and go, man, this is really bad. We need the experts, right?
Right.
So they would run simulations. They had a big like RVs that was converted into being able to run medical simulations. And they would run medical simulations after medical simulation after medical simulation. And they would do sometimes simulations that weren't even medically possible for the staff to complete, because they wanted to see how far they could push the staff medically with their bandwidth. Because the reality is, when those tones go off and my wife gets dispatched to a call, it's minus 40 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's
That's
really
cold.
cold. Yeah, it's really cold. So you get out there and you're in the Canadian prairies in minus 40 degrees, and you've come up on a train that's hit a car, and now you're dealing with firefighters who are trying to cut somebody out of the vehicle. You've got lights and sirens going from the police cars and everything else. You can't give a proper IV because the lines are so small that they freeze in minus 40 degrees weather. You're not all of a sudden going to rock up and be like, yep, I got this. So everything about research tells us you do not rise to the occasion. You actually sink to your level of your foundation. And that piece to me is really important. So as coaches, we're always trying to push athletes a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. So we've built their foundation so big so that their foundation is here. But if their level of competition is here, it gives them a little bit of buffer zone that if things go not quite right, they've got some mental capability to start doing things or to be comfortable. Whereas if you train here and you're trying to compete here, there's a disconnect there. There's a gap there. And I think in church, what we often try to do is be like, well, this is where you're at. And so we're going to train you here. But then the growth isn't really happening, right? So even from research, there's two researchers there, Gardignoli and Lee. They did something called the challenge point framework, which is really fascinating for me, where they talk about how the challenge has to be appropriate for the learner. So for example, a really basic example that I think people can grasp. If I put a garbage can on the ground, ask you to stand over it and drop a paper ball into the garbage can, not a problem. Really, really simple task, right? So now you've matched the task difficulty relative to the ability of the person to perform that task is really low. So what happens is we find that learning doesn't occur in that environment because the learner perceives the task as boring, and so their mind switches into a boredom mindset. Learning doesn't occur. Now, if I take that garbage can and put it 50 meters away and there's 50-mile-an-hour winds blowing and tell them to put that same paper ball into the garbage can, what happens? It probably never goes in. If it does go in, it's pure luck.
That's right.
So what's happened now is that I've moved the challenge so far away that learning also doesn't occur because generally at that stage, the athlete will either go into boredom because they realize it's ridiculous and can't do it, or they'll reach a state of anxiety because they're trying so hard and can't do it. So learning doesn't occur. So where you need to find is that sweet spot. Where's the task challenging enough for the athlete, the difficulty of the skill relative to the performer's ability to perform that skill is so that they actually don't get it in 100% of the time, right? Now, from a sport perspective, I think we can see how that really easily translates, right? But now we need to look at ministry and how we're doing ministry. So, well, what about sharing your testimony? As something as simple as sharing your testimony, right? Well, if you never share your testimony, you're never going to actually get better at sharing your testimony, right? So I remember one time I was on a church board and we were sitting in the meeting and I said, look, guys, I think one of the things we can do to really help change our community is just get our congregation comfortable with sharing our testimony so that we're out at a local coffee shop or at the arena, soccer field, whatever. They just feel comfortable sharing their testimony. Said, but we first as leaders have to do that. So how many of you have publicly shared your testimony? So myself and the pastor put up their hands and I was like, okay, do we see the problem here? That if we as the men who are looking after this church, only 2 out of the group of us have ever only publicly shared our testimony, there's zero chance or very minimal chances that our congregation is going to be doing the same thing, right? So how then can we be building our leaders so that their leaders are teaching those around them to be able to teaching those around them to be able to teaching those around them? And so I think there's some really cool aspects from what's being applied into sport and sport coaching theories and methodologies that can be applied to biblical discipleship and ministry leadership.
That is incredible, Mark. That's awesome. Look, we're gonna take a quick break, let these guys digest that, and we'll come back and keep unpacking it.
If you're looking for a simple way to get your week started right, the weekly roar is for you. So every week, I'll share a short reflection on scripture and a couple practical steps to help you walk it out. It's all about being clear, honest, and staying rooted in God's word. And here's the deal. There's going to be no inbox games. There's no hype. It's just an encouraging and quite often a challenging word to help you steady your week and strengthen in leadership. So if that sounds interesting, sign up for free at thelionwithin.us/roar. And here's the cool part. You can read this in a few minutes and carry it with you the rest of the day. So again, thelionwithin.us/roar, that's ROAR, to get your personal weekly roar every Monday morning.
So, Mark, one thing as you're working through that, obviously the growth doesn't happen in the moments of comfort, but oftentimes people, when they come to church, they're not looking to be challenged. And I think that in itself is the challenge. So, I mean, when you start working with the guy in the gym, obviously I can look at you. You know what you're doing. You're a fit guy. You can go in. You can probably assess pretty quickly by seeing how a person's form or just watching them, do a bench press, whatever it may be, and then you can make those adjustments from there. How do you assess? Like, I think lots of guys. All right, how does the assessment start from a self-reflection and awareness standpoint on my own discipleship journey? Because in order to be coached, you got to know what the starting point is. So what do you look for there?
Yeah, really, really good question. So, I'll share I can share something with you aside from this. I made a YouTube video specifically about reflective practice, and I can share that with you if you want to take a peek at that.
100%.
But it's really, really taking an inventory of yourself. So, one of the things that we use is called an athlete readiness questionnaire. So we ask an athlete various questions on, like, how did you sleep? How was your nutrition? How did you eat today? Did your things in your relationship go well? Did work go well? Did things at school go well? So they're just like some of those basic questions, and just asking how they're doing in relation to being specifically performing for that actual workout.
Right.
Now, you can extrapolate that out, and the best performers in the world do extrapolate this out. It's what's called the performance wheel profile. So you could actually take a look at, I would just start with probably like 6 different things as a starting point, and they could be whatever you choose them to be within, from a faith-based perspective. So it could be how am I doing as a dad? How am I doing as a husband? How am I doing as an employee? Like, you can pick different things. And then what you fill that out on, it's done from a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being the inside of the circle, 10 being the outside of the circle. The further you fill it out, the better you're doing in that area. So it's called the performance wheel profile. Now, what's really effective about these is if you partner together with somebody. So we would do something like, again, this is part of that connection and having meaningful relationships with other guys in your life. And it needs to be guys that know you, and you guys are being intimate with each other relationally to be able to be honest with each other. Right. So I come alongside my buddy, and he's like, hey, here's my performance wheel. And he puts down the 6 things that matter to him. And he scores himself on 0 to 10 on each one of those areas by coloring it in or marking it off. And then what I do is I take that exact same one and I score him how I see him living them out in those areas. And then we put those 2 pieces side by side and go, hey, man, you scored yourself a 6 in being a dad. I scored you as a 7 in being a dad. We're pretty close in that area. You're probably somewhere in a 6 to a 7 on how you're doing in your relationship with being a dad. He maybe looks at it and goes, as a husband, he scores himself 3, and I scored himself as an 8. Well, we've got a big gap here. Okay, so what's happening? Let's discuss this. You're seeing yourself as a 3. I'm seeing you as an 8. Looking at those 2 pieces side by side, where if the one he said I'm a 3 and I say you look like an 8, what does that look like when we put them side by side? And he's going, well, you know what? Actually, Mark, you don't see the times when I snap and I yell at anger into my wife, and I don't do these things that are happening in the relationship. And that's an opportunity to go, okay, great. Let's dig into that. Let's lean into that with prayer. Let's lean into that with accountability. Let's lean into some of those pieces. So I think there is, again, pieces that we can take from that are used in a sporting context and use them within a ministry practice. Now, I do believe that there's also other pieces, like if we look at some things from mindfulness practices that we can incorporate as well into how all those pieces work together. So I do think that there is pieces to look at those things and how we can do it as well. Yeah.
Right. Right. I think there's a lot of power in that too. Just the conversation and the reflection. I've done those exercises where I grade, you grade, and then we look and see where we're at. And I know lots of times that can illuminate areas where maybe I'm blind for one, or some areas where I just maybe I'm a little bit too confident in my personal assessment, and they can give me some reflections that are helpful. But in a faith setting, that can be challenging. I mean, in a gym setting, for sure, I'm looking for that. Like, push me, iron sharpens iron. We like to say iron sharpens iron until we actually start sharpening it, right, in the church. So, so how would you coach guys want to have that truly meaningful conversation? And I mean, I guess it starts with the relationship, right?
Yeah. Well, and like I said, some of those pieces are like you talked about. I talk a little bit about some of those pieces in the book as well. But being in that meaningful relationship with that community, a part of it is accountability as well, right? And I think that's a big part of why the gym is successful, is that there's accountability. And I think when we look at common discipleship practices, there's a lack of accountability in a lot of those pieces, right? And again, that's not to put everything down and be a Debbie Downer about things. It's just trying to be real about some of these things. So I like something, it's called E3 Ministries. I believe that's what it's still called. They have what's called a 3/3 discipleship model. And you can watch YouTube videos on this, and they have some learning tools on it. But it's really interesting. So the first third of your get together is what they call looking back. So how is your week? How are you doing? Those kind of questions. And one of the questions that they also ask is, hey, you said the week before you were going to share the gospel with 2 people at work. How did that go? And now there's an accountability piece attached to it, right? So then what you do, the second part of the discipleship training is what they call looking up. So that is doing your praise and worship, your Bible study, those kind of pieces. And then the third part of it is looking ahead. So we're going to do some forecasting and looking into what are we going to be doing into this next coming week or 2 weeks, whatever the duration is of your time together, and saying, you know what, okay, or the next 2 weeks before we meet, I'm going to read my Bible, or I'm going to read this specific passage, or I'm going to pray with my wife this many times, or I'm going to share my 15-second testimony with this many people. Okay, those things get written down. And then when you start back next week at your next Bible study meeting, your discipleship meeting, you've got these 3 things. I was going to share the gospel with this many people. I was going to do this. I was going to do this. And there's an intentional, hey, how was your week? How was your day? How are things going? And hey, here's your 3 things. How did they go? And you can say, you know what? I didn't do any of them. And that's fine. But there's an accountability to those pieces now. Okay, you didn't do them?
That's right.
What happened? Can we support you in doing something so that you can do them next time? You know what? I was on vacation, it didn't work out, or I really was stressed at work and I didn't feel like it was the appropriate time. Great. Let's keep leaning into it as prayer, as brothers with each other. But we're not just going to say, you get a free pass on them. Let's bring them forward again. And we're going to keep you accountable to those pieces. And I think that this is, again, something in sport that we do well. We track metrics in sport. Are people getting bigger, faster, stronger? Right?
Right.
And
right.
We don't care if people are getting quote unquote bigger, faster, stronger in in ministry per se, but we do. This goes to Hebrews 5, right? Look, man, you should be eating meat and you're drinking milk. Like, come on, guys, come on, right? And part of that is tied to accountability, right? So if we have these accountabilities, there's that growth that's, I don't want to say forced growth, but encouraged growth, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. I mean, I think when I talk with a lot of guys, man, about accountability, most of us want others to be accountable. Rarely do I find the guys that want to be accountable to themselves. So that's what I was saying. I want you to be accountable, Mark, but don't you worry about me. Like, I don't want that same level of pressure at times, but I think that's where the rubber meets the road at. And in the world we live in, guys are motivated to go to the gym because, there's a visible outcome. Lots of times they can see it in the mirror. They can see it in, the way their wife responds to it, whatever it may be. I mean, maybe it's a motivation factor. I don't know. I just think there's definitely a disconnect in, going to sitting on a pew on a Sunday, or maybe being a super Christian where you go on Wednesday night too, versus actually walking out the gospel every day of the week. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Well, and I think this is where we have a little bit of that disconnect between religion and relationship. And that when
Okay.
we're walking in relationship on a daily basis. Whereas when we see churches like something you do or you go to on a Sunday, then it's not become a part of who you are on a regular basis, right? And I think it also has to do with how we allocate time and resources and those kind of things mentally. So I know there's ministries that focus on like it's called like Seize the 167. So it's directed toward ministry leaders. So there's 168 hours in a week, and 1 hour of that is spent preaching, or 1 hour that is spent sitting in a pew on a Sunday morning.
Sure.
What
Yeah.
are you doing for the other 167 hours of the week? Right. So, yeah. So that idea of like seize the 167, like what are you doing with that other parts? Like you said, so I know you made the joke, but I understand the joke that like if you go to church on Wednesday as well, you're a super Christian,
Yeah.
right? But it's making that an entire part of your life, right? So, I was listening to one of your episodes. I'm not sure how recent it was, but you're in the episode. You were talking about rather than like buying the gifts for the kids that you wanted, give them the knowledge that you wish they'd had. And I was like, that is so important. So I have my 3-year-old son, and he's downstairs, and he's like, "Look, Daddy, I made a sling like David." And
There you go.
dude, I didn't have that same sort of knowledge when I was 3 years old, right? So we read our kids' Bible studies, Bible stories multiple times a day. When we sit down for meals, we usually go through a couple different Bible stories in their kids' Bibles. At nighttime, we always pray with them. We sing the Arianic blessing with them. We say the Lord's Prayer with them, and then we do a regular prayer with them. And it's just trying to instill these types of things. But I said to my wife, this past weekend, we were away at a little vacation, just a mini vacation. And I looked across the table at my wife and I said, my son has way more Bible knowledge than I did at his age. Like, he was at church the other day and they were telling a story and he was like, "Oh yeah, this story." And the teacher was like, "I cannot believe how much of that story that he knew. He's only 3." And I was like, but like, yes, like that's the kind of stuff we need to like be putting in, right?
Right.
And building that in to our kids. But but how much more as a dad do I need to be the one that's challenging myself too, right? So I enjoy going to the gym. There's fellowship with other guys there. I do enjoy the workouts, those kind of things. But I'm an old dad, so I turn 50 in a couple of years. I turn 47 in December. I'm obviously not far away from 50. I have a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old, and I have a baby on the way. Right.
Wow.
So I'm going to be an old dad. There's no getting around that. But I don't want to use that as an excuse. So I want to be able to run around with my boys. I want to be able to throw a baseball, play tag in the park. I want to do all these things. So if I want to be able to do all those things with him, I need to be investing that time into myself so that I can be the man that he needs and wants me to be as well. And that doesn't just apply to being able to run and play baseball with him. That applies to how I am with him spiritually as well. I need to be investing into myself, reading my Bible, doing what like spiritual training,
Sure.
so that I can be the man that he needs and wants me to be as his father, right?
Right.
So yeah,
Hats off to you there. I mean, hats off, and you're leaning in. You're being intentional. Maybe talk to the guy real quick out there that's when they're hearing this thing about discipleship, accountability, A lot of it comes down to priority, how we spend time. The evil one has a great way of keeping us busy, making us think, well, we can get to this later. And that's a lot what I find what I'm fighting for is just guys' attention because everybody's their calendars are so full. So how do we prioritize? I mean, what have you seen to be the most effective way for guys to prioritize spending that time in the Word, spending that time with true iron sharpening iron type conversation relationship? Because we'll find ways, to your point, we'll show up to the gym every day.
Yeah.
If we make that a priority, but often this falls off. So any tips for the guys who's struggling there?
Well, so a couple things is I'm going to tie this to the discipleship piece that you asked about as well. So you asked about discipleship in the church. My experience personally with discipleship is I've had a few men come alongside me in my life, both from a professional perspective who have mentored me, but also from a faith perspective who have mentored me. I'm going to term that those terms were accidental. I do believe that they were divinely inspired, but when I say accidental, in that there wasn't a specific like path from the church or these kind of things. Like I was working as a soccer coach and somebody said, "Hey, you should check out this soccer coach." And then we connected together and ended up being a Christian man. And we ended up fellowshipping together and have grown tremendously through that. But I would say it kind of came across accidentally. If we leave our spiritual health to that same accidental piece, we're not going to get there. We're not leaving our physical health accidentally. We schedule, okay, I'm going to go to the gym between 7 to 8 o'clock, and I put it in my calendar. And like I can look in my calendar now and I can see which workouts I'm attending next week already because I've scheduled them into my calendar, right? My wife knows when they're in there because it shows that we have a shared calendar. So it shows up in her calendar as well. Okay, Mark is going to be at the gym at this time. And it's in the calendar. Why don't we do those things with our spiritual health as well? Why don't we set aside, and maybe it's not an hour, maybe an hour would frighten you to death to be like, what am I going to do for an hour? Okay, well, don't make it an hour. So again, it's something I asked the athletes at the gym today. We had a movement toes to bar where you're hanging from a bar and you have to bring your toes up and touch the bar. And there was a lot of them in the workout. And I said, hi, guys, how do you eat an airplane? And they all look at me kind of strange. I said, just so you're aware, somebody in the Guinness book actually has eaten an airplane. But the way he did it was really small pieces, breaks it down into really small pieces and eats it. When you look at something like this and you're like, whoa, that is a lot of toes to bar movements. I can't do that many. No, maybe you can't do that many in one big chunk. Can you break that down into smaller pieces and do those smaller pieces? Yeah, I can do that. Perfect. That's how you're going to attack this workout today. And we do the same thing. So don't look at it and go, I don't know what I'm going to do for an hour. Okay, well, don't schedule an hour right away. Schedule 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And it's the same as going to the gym. I could go to the gym 2-3 times a day for an hour each time, be totally fine with it. But I've been doing this for years now, right? I didn't start there. And it's unrealistic for me when somebody new comes to expect them to be like, they're going to come 4 to 5 days a week. They're going to come for an hour every time and this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. That's not a realistic expectation for them. And they're probably actually going to get hurt because they're going to experience pains and all kinds of stuff that whoa, this is crazy, right? So let's introduce them. Come a couple times a week. Come for the classes. We'll give you some of the scaled versions of the movements. And then we'll slowly progress you to like, okay, now you move from holding onto a medicine ball. Now you're going to hold a kettlebell. Now you're going to hold a barbell. Instead of just hanging from the bar, now I want you to hang from the bar, move your knees up and progress through. And now now that same person is saying, hey, you know what? I want to up my membership. I want to come 4 times a week now. I want to start trying to do different movements, the more harder movements and those kind of things. Perfect. And we do the same. Let's do the same thing with people. Let's not just be like, you better be reading your Bible or an hour a day, have to be praying an hour a day and those kind of things. People are going to be like, whoa, can't do that.
That's right.
Okay. Let's make it really simple for you. How do you eat an airplane? Small bites. Yeah. So
right.
Can you do a 2-minute prayer? Perfect. Can you do 2 minutes of reading the Bible? Perfect. Can you do 2 minutes of something else? Now we've got 6 minutes put together. We've broken it down into smaller pieces. Okay, let's start there. Oh, you know what? Hey, your prayer drifted into 3 or 4 minutes this next time. Or, hey, you spend a little bit of time extra listening to God and you're journaling, writing some of these things down. And it drifted into 8 minutes, 9 minutes. Okay, great, right? But setting aside it intentionally in your calendar going to be like from whatever time of the day it is, I would suggest for most people, do it earlier in the day. The earlier in the day you do it, the more chance there is you're going to be successful with it. If you put it to later on in the day, something at work might happen, something with the family might happen, this might happen, you get home, you're tired, and make an excuse and go, you know what? I'm just not there for that. Put it at the beginning of the day. It has a higher chance of being done. And then the other part about it is, and I'm going to use a gym joke here. There was a picture of Hafthor Bjornsson, who's one of the strongest men in the world. It's a picture of him running, and it's like, running is the perfect way to start off your day, to know that it's not going to get any worse after this, because he's making a joke that he doesn't want to run, right? But the flip side of that is, put it at the start of your day, and you're starting your day off on a really positive foot, and you're started your day with scripture and prayer, and that's going to lead you rather than lag behind you at the end of the day.
100%.
So
100%. Great point, Mark. Great point. Well, when we get towards the end of our conversation, we always like to have a little fun lightning round with our guests. So if you're willing to play, we'll jump right in and have some fun.
Let's do it.
All right. What about hobbies? What do you enjoy doing for fun, Mark?
Disc golf.
Disc golf.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Been doing that for a long time?
So just before COVID, I was introduced to disc golf in 2013 by a roommate.
Okay.
I wasn't married at the time. 2013, and then in 2018, I had a significant knee injury on my right knee, and wanted to still be physically active. Couldn't do the things I was used to, soccer, ultimate, that kind of stuff. And somebody was like, "Hey, what about disc golf? There's a course just down the road." And I was like, I think I can do that. So yeah, I enjoy playing disc golf.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now you're super fit. You coach folks, but what's your go-to food? Where are you going to when it's time to get down?
So one of the things I really enjoy eating, and I think it's been accentuated since moving here, is I enjoy going to Five Guys and having a lettuce wrap burger. I don't eat gluten myself, so I have a lettuce wrap burger. I really enjoy the burger, a lettuce wrap from Five Guys.
There you go.
My ultimate go-to meal is my mom's homemade sweet and sour meatballs.
Okay, that's the go-to.
Yeah.
There you go. You can't beat mama's cooking. I get it. All right, if you could have a superpower, Mark, which superpower would you have, and how would you use it?
Oh my goodness, a superpower. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. A superpower. I mean, selfishly, I think it'd be fun to run real fast.
Yeah, I mean, you're an athlete, so I totally can see that, right? Let's go.
Yeah.
What about music? What do you listen to?
So that's an interesting question. I think it really depends on the situation. Like when I'm at home with the boys, I generally put on like worship music. Again, trying to have that positive influence for them. I saw a meme yesterday, and I think it's really it was interesting. Again, I was talking to the gym. It was a picture of a dad, headphones on, doing like a tricep press down. And it says, like, I'm listening to music about like drinking and smoking and drugs and gangs and guns. Meanwhile, I go to bed at 8:00 and don't drink alcohol and like all these other kind of things. Right. And it's just like this kind of like weird dichotomy. I do have a affinity for 90s music. So like, I think Dance Mix 93 is one of the best albums ever made. But I also really like the 90s sort of like Christian rap, hip hop style music as well. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. How about anything right now that's in your life that you're struggling with? We always like to be transparent with our listeners too, because somebody I'm listening to our guests, they're like, well, this guy's crushing it in life. He never struggles with anything, but anything that you're battling right now.
Being a good dad. Now, I know that might sound strange, but I was bullied quite significantly when I was younger. And that has had a profound impact on my life, which is part of the reason why I started going to the gym and I started doing myself. I did jiu-jitsu and combat sports and that kind of stuff. I made an intentional choice to say, I am not going to be that person that walks into a room and people go, hey, I want to bully that guy. I wanted the exact opposite response. I wanted to walk into a room and people be like, that guy over there, that's not the guy that I'm going to that's the last person in the room that I'm going to choose to mess with if I'm going to choose to bug somebody. So I intentionally created this personality, I would say. In doing so, I also created a very negative part of myself, where is if somebody says or does something towards me, my immediate response is fight as a protection mechanism, being like, you're
Okay.
not going to bully, I'm going to fight. So now sometimes when my 3-year-old says, no, daddy, my immediate response is like, what did you say?
Right.
Because
Right.
I've trained myself as somebody used the term that I think is worded well. It says better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And so I trained myself to be that warrior. The problem is now I struggle to be the gardener. I struggle to
Okay.
sometimes be that very peaceful, calm. And so when my son comes at me, and he's not doing it to attack me, he's not doing it to bullying me, he's just being a 3-year-old.
That's right.
And my response is like, what? And then I catch myself, or sometimes my wife is like, babe, he's not trying to like attack you. And I'm like, I know. So then I find myself having to go to him and be like, hey, you know what? Daddy was a little bit harsh with that. I'm sorry for that. So I struggle with my initial response in parenting is generally, not, I don't know if generally, but has probably a tendency towards being a little bit harsher than it needs to be.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you for the transparency with that. It's hard to find that with guys. So I really appreciate you being open right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about God? When you think about God in general, what's your favorite thing about him?
Right now, I would say grace. Now,
Okay.
that's going to sound interesting coming from somebody who has arrived into the Netherlands, has sort of bucked against the Calvinism here a little bit, because grace in the Calvinistic faith is a very prominent part of the Calvinistic faith is grace. I don't mean it in the same perspective. I just mean it in truly who God is as part of his being, not from like a, I do say deep theological, but I want to, like I said, I want to disconnect it from a religious piece to a relationship piece, in that, one of the books that I had recently been assigned for reading for seminary was called The Way of Grace. And it's about a gentleman who got Parkinson's disease. And then he's experiencing what it's like to have to go through life and do things and experience things that he didn't have to experience previously because of how the disease is now affecting him. And then he's come to a place of grace as a result of that. And then even as far as this morning, so my little guy comes to the gym in between classes. I've got a break. I was coaching this morning, and there's a break in between some of the classes. And he came to the gym, and he was swinging some of the weights around in a way that was a little bit haphazardly and possibly could have hurt himself or hurt somebody else. And I just kind of like, hey. And then he like froze, because it's like, whoa, that was a really strong hey from daddy, right? And then you kind of see him like slump over a little bit, be sad. And I was like, oh man, I did it again. Crap. And then I texted my wife and I was like, babe, I'm sorry. Like, I shouldn't have snapped at him. There was no need to snap at him that way. I could have said, hey buddy, you know what? That's probably not the best way to be swinging those weights around right now. Let's try a different way. And her response back to me was like, how awesome is it though that we have God's grace to be able to like be like, if we're humble enough that we can walk into that grace. And now, so I came home, my 3-year-old runs to the door, daddy. It's like, hey buddy, it's so good to see you. And then after he kind of calmed down for a bit, I was like, was daddy a little bit harsh to the gym today? Yeah, you were, daddy. So I'm sorry, buddy. That's okay, daddy. And I was just like, man, that grace is what I would say right now.
Beautiful picture. Let's flip it 180. What's your least favorite thing about the evil one?
I think so. I'm going to not quote this correctly, but essentially the greatest lie that the devil ever achieved was convincing people they didn't exist, right? There's a quote that's somewhere in that. I paraphrase it a little bit, but I think we are experiencing spiritual warfare right now. Globally. I think we're really truly seeing spiritual warfare played out globally, and the deceit that is happening, that people are not believing, one, that it's spiritual warfare, and then partly as a result of that, but also partly because of how uh, I'm not sure if you're familiar with C.S. Lewis, the Screw Tape Letters.
Yeah, very familiar.
Right. So I think we're seeing a lot of those things play out in like people being distracted by things. And then not only is there distraction, but there's division. And so that's what I really hate, is the amount of division and distraction that is going on. It's tearing everything to pieces. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, Mark, the last question for you in this lightning round. What do you hope the listeners remember the most from our conversation today?
Not to play me in a game of Settlers of Catan.
Noted.
No,
noted.
I'm just kidding. I really enjoy playing a lot of it. That the path is narrow, and not everybody's going to agree with you on that. But to get men around you to help you, encourage you to walk on that path, but not just to get men around you to encourage you to be on your journey, but also encouraging people to be the one that's supporting men on their journey as well. And I think that that's a cyclical piece, is to let's walk together on this. You're not alone. You don't have to be alone. Yes, obviously God is with us, but there is other people, human men that God has placed on this earth with the mandate, with the intention, with the purpose to walk side by side with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Amen, brother. Amen. Where do you want to send the listeners out there if they want to connect with you, get the book, follow any of the stuff that you're doing? Where's the best place to go?
If people are interested in buying the book, the best place to get that is on Amazon. So they can get that from Amazon. Just search for "This Is the Way" by Mark Oxer. Should show up on there. And if people would do me a huge favor and leave a review, that'd be greatly appreciated, so that it helps other people find the book. It doesn't do anything for me from a financial perspective, but it just helps other people find the book. So if people leave a review, that'd be great. And if they want to connect with me, they can do that on social media. Mark.Oxer on Instagram, Mark Oxer on Facebook. They can follow my Faith and Fitness Project on Instagram as well. I do have a YouTube channel, and not a lot of content on it, but they can check that out as well, or they can come to my website, just markoxer.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll make sure we try to get that out for you guys. Mark, this has been, I've thoroughly enjoyed it and spending time with you. Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I really appreciated this. This has been really enjoyable, and I very much appreciate you taking the opportunity for me to be a guest on the show.
Amen, brother. Well, you have a great day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, you too.
All right, guys, I told you that was going to be a good one. So hopefully you enjoyed that conversation with Mark. Thank him again for coming on the show. Question of the week this week is, how much time do you give daily to spiritual training? And we spent a lot of time talking with Mark about time in the gym, prioritizing time with family. But what are we doing to really prioritize that spiritual training that we so desperately need, each and every one of us in our lives? And if you're struggling with that, I would just encourage you, reach out to the Lion Within Us. We have resources, we have tools, we have abilities to help you with your spiritual journey, whether it be, reading plans on the Bible app. Obviously, we have tons and tons of those. But from the community element of the Lion Within Us, we have intentional conversations all throughout the week. We have Lion Lunch, we have Bible studies, we have Friday Forge. We give you opportunities to further your discipleship journey. So if you're trying to do this thing alone, or maybe you just don't have a big men's group, we have hundreds of guys in this thing, fellas. It's incredible to see what God is doing. So head over to thelionwithin.us, start your membership. Go ahead and Go into the community, start that 30-day free trial of the community, see what that's all about. I mean, we're talking about minimal investments here, fellas, but this stuff is big, big impacts. So go check it out, get that started. If you want to talk about leadership masterminds, if you think you're to that point in your discipleship journey where you want to really, truly lean in harder, that's what our leadership masterminds are all about. Okay. So go check that out. All the resources, everything, The Lion Within. Don't forget the Lion Within. .us is where you find it, guys. Okay. All right. We'll come back on Friday. We'll have a good, fun Friday episode for you. Look forward to hanging out with you guys. Have a great day. Give us a rating and review. Again, the Lion Within.us. Connect with us over there. Have a good one. Keep unleashing the lion within.
If you've ever opened the Bible and had the thought, where do I even start? Brother, you're not alone. I've had those moments all too often. And I found that having a guide was helpful. And that's why we created the I'm Just a Guy series on the Bible app. They're short, they're honest, and they help you read scripture and walk it out. And these plans speak to the real stuff that we're wrestling with as men, like marriage, anxiety, loneliness, shame, pornography, and so much more. And do this all without pretending or piling on a bunch of self-help nonsense. And lots of guys are using them in their small groups, and they're helping to spark honest conversations and take simple next steps in their discipleship journey. So if that sounds helpful, check them out at thelionwithin.us/uversions. That's YOUVERSION. Or just open up your Bible app and search for The Lion Within Us. And it's my hope that these reflections will encourage you in just a few minutes and help you walk with him all day long.